Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, instead of starting the podcast with an open question for you this week, I want to start it with a story for you. I'm letting you off the hook a little bit.
I love this. I love storyteller Bob.
The other night, like 3 nights ago at this point, Friday night, I was walking to a bar in Brooklyn, and we were walking ahead of a group of older folks, 2 older women, 2 or 3 older men, and then what appeared to be maybe like their children were also with them too, who were also adults. And they were talking about none other than the sport of baseball, which got me excited. So you know what I did? I slowed my pace down a little bit so I could eavesdrop and hear what they were talking about and potentially use it for the cold open of this podcast. And it was successful because you know what they were talking about? One of the women was explaining to the group that Major League Baseball umpires are scored based on an automated strike zone that is an AI program that tells the league whether or not the pitch was a ball or a strike. And she was just explaining it to them, and they were so curious about this. They were like, so there's a computer and it tells them whether it's a strike, but it doesn't actually affect what happens in the game. It's just after the fact, like a report card. And I'm walking in front of them and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, wow, these people have such a deep rabbit hole to go down. If they're just learning about how umpires are scored based on their accuracy, they have so many take cycles to go through. I'm jealous of them.
I know. How young and naive, you know?
They learned about ABS.
Could you get a vibe on like what the response was to it? Was she saying it like, the game has gone the way of the nerds?
No, they were just like genuinely curious. Like they weren't dumping on it. They weren't like, this is good, this is bad, this is nothing. They were just like, can you believe it? Technology.
Oh my God, they're never going to make it online. Are you kidding me? You got to have a take.
Yeah, you do have to have a take. So should I have turned around and said something to them? Should I have been like, this is actually a huge labor rights issue for the MLB Umpires Union?
I'm sure that would have pulled them in more.
Should I have turned around and said, no, actually, Cowboy Joe West, recently retired umpire, longest tenured umpire of all time, who moonlights as the blue cowboy Joe. He actually didn't like the automated balls and strike system, so you should reconsider whether you think that this is good for the game or not.
You need to be out there spreading the good word, Bobby. Look, we may not be able to talk about of Cowboy Joe, of the
anti-technology movement in baseball.
Right. Hey, look, the topics might be banned here. You know, you can't talk analytics, you can't talk rule changes, but out on the street with the common man and woman, I mean, that's your bread and butter. That's your time to shine.
My favorite part of this story is that it's like opening weekend, so ostensibly more people are talking about baseball than ever, and this was the topic. This isn't even a new thing. Like, it's not one of the rule changes. It's not the pitch clock. Maybe I just came into the conversation late and they had already gotten through that bullet point list of topics, and were moving on to older news for the group of people who did not know much about baseball. But I just thought it was so interesting. That's not your typical street corner conversation point.
I know about the game of baseball. Well, it is interesting that they didn't go to, again, we're going so deep on what was maybe a 90-second snippet that you heard, right? But it's interesting.
No, they were having like a Socratic seminar. Like, they were going back and forth.
This is amazing. You should have invited them on.
Turn around and honestly, they probably
this
could
is
tell
our trip
that
to the flyover states.
They could probably tell that I had a baseball podcast.
Right. I think it's telling that they didn't touch on the new rule changes whatsoever and went straight to like umpiring, right? The automated balls and strikes. That was the most interesting thread to pull at in baseball right now, right? It was not, wow, did you hear the games are 15 minutes shorter? It was not, I hear stolen bases are up.
Are you telling me that
this year?
the games being 15 minutes shorter doesn't really matter to anybody except a select few people of online baseball fans.
Yeah, I am telling you that. Yeah.
Yesterday was Easter, and my family was over for Easter, and my aunt was asking me about all the new rule changes, and she was like, and also this instant replay. She's like, I can't believe that either. And I'm like, you mean the thing that's been around for like 15 years? I think she thought that instant replay was new too, because they were instituting all these new rule changes and she just didn't notice it before.
Right.
So I was like, yes, I have many thoughts on instant replay, many of which are available in public forums. But I don't really think Easter dinner is the right place for me to resurface those.
Right. That's, you know how they say don't bring politics up at the dinner table with your family. Like this is our can of worms that you don't want anyone at the Easter table to open up. Like don't get him started. Don't wind him up because he'll just go.
Well, that's kind of like that's like the banned topics. That's like the whole concept. We took that whole like no politics, religion, and sex at the dinner table, and we applied that to the podcast.
Yeah, your family doesn't know that though.
Well, they should listen to the pod then. In retrospect, do you think we should have banned the topic of Jazz Chisholm? Maybe not on the podcast, but with each other?
Yeah, probably. Given our lengthy discussions at this weekend's Mets game.
It lasted like 6 innings. Uh-huh. Like it would stop down for like a couple outs, and then Jazz would be involved in a play, of which he was involved in many.
Yeah.
In the game on Saturday. Diving catch, a home run, bad route to a ball, and it would just it would come back up.
This is our new DH.
I know we have to have something to like redirect our energy to. We agree on so many things that we have to just find
at least
thing
one exactly,
so that we can just like focus all of our negative energy into that and keep our relationship healthy. Otherwise,
exactly.
Okay, Alex, we have a fun episode today. An early baseball season mailbag to answer all of your questions related and unrelated to baseball. You know, we're going to go through them all, no matter what they are, as many as we can get through in a normal length podcast. A normal length podcast, which is under 2 hours, just so everybody knows, under 2 hours. This will be under 2 hours. This is not the elusive 2 hour podcast yet. We're just going to keep that one dangling out in front. Before we do that, I am Bobby Wagner.
I am Alex Baisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Do you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn money. All in one place, for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And Alex, how does it work?
I'm so glad you asked, Bobby. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup's like, you can start creating today. And then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Spotify for Podcasters is where we host our podcast, and it is super easy to use. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Okay, thank you to this week's new patrons, Jacob, Will, Clive, Brian, Langendorfer, and Doug. Anything that you want to get off your chest before we dive into the mailbag? Because once we do, there's no looking back.
Not really. You know, the only thing I'll note, and you alluded to this already, but Bobby, we saw a real live baseball game this weekend. We saw the New York Mets play the Miami Marlins. And can I just say, really happy baseball's back.
Yeah.
Really like being back out there. It's a good sport. You know what I didn't think about when I was out there? Pace of play, stolen bases. Not any of these things came into my mind. I was just really happy to be back in a baseball stadium with my friends. I don't know. It's a vibe, man. Always is.
Yeah, but you didn't have time to focus on any of those things because you were too busy trying to get yourself on the Jumbotron during Piano
Clearly,
Man.
I know.
Did you know
Famously, my favorite song.
Did you know I didn't know that happened? I don't really know where I was or what I was doing or what I was paying attention to while you were doing that. But Alex went into the aisle to get the attention of the cameraman who was up in our section a lot for some reason.
A lot.
Like all the way up in 525. And the cameraman, he just wanted to be a man of the people, I guess.
Yeah.
And you were the star. You were the guy who caught his attention.
Yeah, if we're being honest, I don't really remember where I was during that also.
There's
I
photo
think
evidence.
it was a bit of an out of body experience for me.
Your face you're just like kind of straight facing in the photo that we got of you on the Jumbotron. This just takes us to our first question, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
We were asked by Zane on Twitter, the Mets' new scoreboard. Is it too big? I mean, with firsthand experience of being on it,
right,
of filling up some of those pixels. What do you think?
Yeah, I did not think it was too big until I saw my big ass face on there.
I'm actually really.
At which point I was like, "Dear God!"
I'm actually really upset that I didn't see it in real time. That you were on the scoreboard because that might be the only time ever.
Yeah, I'm not letting it happen again. All of Citi Field got to see my pores. Like it was.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve Cohen.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too big.
No,
it doesn't feel that much. It does feel bigger if you think about it, but mostly because they just expanded the screen to where all of the weird crypto ads and stuff and like the hospital ads used to be all around the screen. So now it's just like, it's the same size structure, more or less. It's just all screen. And it's in the opposite direction from the field.
Right. Yeah. I got to hand it to him. Getting rid of the ads.
Yeah.
For more space for baseball content. That's a man of the people right there.
Is Steve Cohen socialist? My column. Maybe that should be your newsletter. You know, the newsletter that you didn't actually send out last week, even though you bragged about prepping for it a week in advance.
I'm sorry. It's a lot of work, guys.
Okay. No, the screen is not too big. Next question.
Hi, Tipping Pitches. It's Maddie, fan from New Hampshire, calling in. Excuse the background noise. This is going to be one of your weirder fan calls because I'm calling from a horse barn where I'm currently mucking stalls. But I was listening to your latest episode about Bryce Harper and the horny books, and I had some thoughts. As a self-proclaimed expert on horny books, because I listen to a lot of them, or read a lot of them, he chose really bad ones, which kind of makes this whole thing terrible, because you want people to, like, appreciate romance books and funny books for what they are, and really get into them, and I'm all down for a Bryce Harper book club, but he picked, like, two of the worst books out there. Like, I read a lot of those genre of books and couldn't get through Al Kennedy. So, good luck with the book club. And if you need other baseball-themed horny books, so to speak, for this book club, let me know. I got plenty of recs, and they're much better than The Deal. Thanks. Bye.
So obviously last week when we talked about Bryce Harper and his romance novels in Gentleman's Quarterly, neither of us had read either of these books or were familiar with them, and so we couldn't comment on the quality of them. But is it surprising at all to you that these books are not good?
It's not surprising. I mean, the sense that I get is that these are very zeitgeisty books right now. The Goodreads summary, right, for The Deal by Al Kennedy reads New York Times bestseller and TikTok sensation. Al Kennedy brings you the first in this sexy off-campus series that everyone's talking about. She's about to make a deal with the college bad boy. Hannah Wells has finally found someone who turns her on.
I still have not fully processed that he decided to shout
Bryce
this out
Harper is
in a
saying
GQ
it with his
interview.
chest.
No, it's sick.
So this begs the question: does Bryce Harper have a TikTok? Like, is he on Romance Talk?
I mean, there's probably an easy answer to this question. He probably does have a TikTok, and it's probably like publicly available, and just neither of us like know about it.
It's not a very fun answer, though.
So you think he has a burner TikTok account where he's just like inhaling romance novel content?
Right.
Well, so we got a question later in here asking us to make baseball book recommendations. So maybe Maddie should just write back in and share all of her thoughts on what would be a better replacement to The Deal by Al Kennedy.
Yeah.
Should we read The Deal so that we can confidently dump on it a little bit. Like I feel bad. Like Elle Kennedy's getting
The short end of the stick here.
Yeah,
Can't defend herself. Once again, we've reached the territory where I have to ponder the question: how far will I go for the bit? Right? Will I buy Bryce Harper's $40 pomade?
Oh, I thought you were going to say $40 book recommendation. I was like, geez,
no.
she's pulling in $40 for this. It must be a real big TikTok sensation. $40.
You
That's
can
like
get it for like
textbook.
$5 on Kindle. Yeah, I know.
The $40 pomade you did buy, right?
No.
No?
No.
Come on.
I thought you did. I thought you said you tried some of the products.
I had the shampoo, but it was a gift, a gag gift. So my mom was willing to go further for the bit than you. Wow. Once again, our mom's going further for the pod than we ever will.
Mm-hmm. And your mom doesn't even listen.
Well, she listens occasionally. She'll be like, I listened to the last 6 episodes yesterday. It's like, wow, that's too much me, even for me.
Yeah.
You know, like I have to be in this head 24 hours a day. Like you don't have to.
I'm like, why'd you choose to do that?
She's like, I was doing some gardening and I just needed something to listen to, and it was just up there, and I was like, I'm catching up. She's like hearing about what happened in the World Series. I'm like, got bad news for you. It's already decided. Maddie, thank you for calling in and confirming that Bryce Harper doesn't have good taste in books. Although I'm not totally surprised by that. Should we just do the baseball books question now, Alex? Jake in the Slack asked about, we've discussed this before, but not sure if it ever came up on an episode. What are your favorite books that you'd recommend to people? Your favorite baseball books that you'd recommend to people? I don't know. Have we talked about this on the Slack? We've talked about this in so many different places that you joked that this should be on our FAQs page on our website, I guess, that nobody actually goes to. Frequently asked questions that no one will see by Alex and Bobby. Baseball books. I wrote down 3, only 2 of which I have read, one of which is like at the top of my want to read list, which I feel like people underrate in recommendations. Like just because I haven't read it doesn't mean that it's not a better book than the books that I am going to recommend. I want to read it really badly. Just haven't been able to get around to it. The first one is Lords of the Realm. I mean, like, would this even be the Tipping Pitches FAQ without a Lords of the Realm recommendation? Which is like the pocket history, the whole story of the formation of the MLB Players Association and how the owners created the financial situation of the game. It's like one of the
it's like a people's history of baseball.
Yeah, it's like one of the best sports books ever written, not just specific to baseball. My second recommendation is The Only Rule It Has to Work, Ben Lindbergh and Sam Miller's book, where they literally took over an independent league baseball team, the Sonoma Stompers, for a year, and ran it like a saberhead dreams about running a baseball team, and saw how it went. Hence the title, The Only Rule It Has to Work. It doesn't matter if it looks good. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't matter if it tracks with baseball history. It just has to work, and they have to win. And the writing style, you and I both read this in college. It was like I read it and then passed it to you, or you read it and then passed it to me, like across the common room of our apartment. Right. And the writing style is similarly tag teamed. It's Ben writing a chapter and Sam writing a chapter. And so you see from their different perspectives how some of these strategies played out, what they were thinking during some of these strategies. And it's kind of like an irreplaceable look into front office philosophy, into sabermetric philosophy, and how it clashes with clubhouse culture. And it was written a while ago at this point, like, I don't know, like 8 or 10 years ago at this point. And so obviously some things have progressed to be part of the mainstream, but at the time that they were doing them, it seemed ridiculous to ask, especially indie ball players who are like fighting and scrapping for their chance in affiliated ball, to try something that seems reckless or weird. So that would be my recommendation for people who haven't read it. Of course, we've recommended that before. And then my third recommendation is Stealing Home, the book about the formation of Dodger Stadium and the displacement of the indigenous people of Chavez Ravine to make that happen, which I have not read, which is written by Eric Nussbaum, which it's kind of like dereliction of duty that neither of us have read this book at this point, because it has so many crossover themes with what we talk about in the present. It's historical telling of what actually happened and the ways that, the big business of capitalism and baseball come in and steamroll everything in their path to create this mythos, this baseball nirvana that is Dodger Stadium and Chavez Ravine. It's like, well, how did they actually get that done? And it's, for a lot of the people that I've talked to who have read it, it's like a deeply upsetting story. And so it's maybe not like a quick beach read or like a fun, propulsive read in the way that like Evan's book was when we did that in sort of like a de facto Tipping Pitches book club last month. But nonetheless, an unbelievable story that I would really love to get around to reading.
Yeah, all great recommendations. The only rule is it has to work was on my list as well. I think I read that in like a literal weekend. Like, it's so easy to devour. And as you mentioned, just a really great sort of look at different strains of baseball philosophy and kind of how they clash with each other. A couple other ones that I'd recommend. The first is a fictional book, The Art of Fielding by Chad Harbach. It follows a young man playing baseball in college, and it is kind of a coming of age story about love and loss. And baseball is more the backdrop, than it is kind of the focal point.
Yeah.
And I think the book does a good job of showing how baseball can be that sort of setting, right? How it is such a good, how the cadences of it lend itself well to being a setting, right? Being a scene for a grander story. I read it years ago, and I'd love to revisit it just because, I don't know, it's a really unique book, and would rec.
Do you reread books a lot?
No.
Me either, because there's like so many books, just unlimited amounts of books. And even though I know that I would get a lot out of reading books, I can never just get over that hurdle in my brain that's like, you need to read the next thing. You need to learn
you could
the
just
next
be
thing.
reading something you haven't read before.
Yeah, exactly. But like, well, I guess because it's so much more of a time commitment, but I'll rewatch like, my favorite movies all the time.
Yeah.
Even when those movies are 3+ hours.
I'll also recommend The Arm by one Jeffrey Passan.
Wow.
Heard of him?
We're doing Jeff Passan shilling on the
We're
pod
doing
today?
Jeff Passan shilling on the pod right now. It's a good book. I learned a lot. There's a lot in there that I still think about today that goes into sort of the science of the pitcher's arm, right? And there were some really interesting threads in there as well about sort of the different approaches that different baseball leagues take to taking care of their players' arms, seeing the sort of culture clashes, seeing the different approaches that leagues and sort of cultures take to taking care of their players. It's a really fascinating look, especially as the sport continues to grow more and more international and there's more and more visibility there. I think it provides some really interesting context. So those are the two that I'll throw on the pile.
I think the interesting thing about The Arm is that, like, in a game that's so empirical, like baseball, how unscientific taking care of your body is and how important it is to actually being able to do the thing that you've trained for your whole life. So the delicate balance between, like, how much stress do I put on the tendons in my elbow to make my pitches better if it also might end my career?
Right.
And how much can we even learn about that? I feel like that has become, as like Tommy John has gone through the roof, partially because the surgery is better and we're better at diagnosing it, and because everybody knows that it's not like a career-ending thing, so they don't put it off as long as people used to in past years. But like, in large part because of the increased velocities and the increased velocity on breaking pitches, which add more stress to your elbow. But like, is that even true? Do we even know that that's true? Like, a lot of this stuff is sort of pseudoscience, like it's passed down wisdom about you should never throw a curveball when you're in Little League because that will mean that you'll tear your elbow by the time you're 18. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know if any of that is true. Like, the Little League coach who told me that, I wouldn't trust him to tell me anything else
right.
at this point. But I just believed it, and like these different like baseball pieces of baseball received knowledge that we just accept as true versus like, is there a better way to learn more about this? And like his book is kind of the seminal text on this specific thing.
Yeah. Hates me to have to hand it to him. You know.
Okay. Next question. Our good friend Tom in the Slack. Is grumpy old man Mike Schmidt correct? Were the Phillies NL championship rings far too ostentatious for something that isn't the World Series? So Tom is alluding to the fact that yesterday before the Phillies Reds game, or 2 days ago, I don't really remember which day they actually gave them the rings, but they had an on-field ceremony for the Phillies winning the National League pennant, and they passed out rings, pennant winning rings.
Right.
You know what? They look a lot like World Series rings.
Yeah, they do.
Like if you were going to make a World Series ring, I'm not sure what you would change about this ring to make it, other than the fact that it would say World Series champions instead of National League champions.
Yeah.
So Tom wants to know. Well, Mike Schmidt had a whole thing about how this is like loser behavior, more or less. Like,
right,
millennials, they just all get trophies and
participation trophy
exactly.
culture.
And
yeah,
that's Tom's question. Is that line of thinking correct? Do we agree with Mike Schmidt about this? Love to hear what you have to say, because I feel very strongly one way. And I don't want to muddy the waters with my strong opinion,
of course,
and make you feel pressure to agree with me.
It pains me to be a hater. It really does. I just want that to be known. But why are we doing this?
Yes.
Why are we doing NL championship rings?
I agree. Does anyone else ever do this?
I know. Like, was there just a designer who was working on this in October who then, when the Phillies lost, was like, well, these can't go to waste. I even put dancing on my own on the inside of it. Like, how are we not going to have the players wear these?
If they had won the World Series, do you think that they would have given them 2 rings? Because the fact that the NL championship ring exists makes it seem like it was going to exist no matter, like it has to exist then.
Right.
Like,
so is there an AL championship ring?
I don't know.
Do the Astros have one?
I don't know. Honestly, this is probably one of those things where like there is. And like, no, but they just don't make a ceremony out of it. But like all the previous World Series winners, like they have 2 separate rings, and the one ring like goes in a drawer somewhere, and the World Series ring goes in like a case, and it's the only one that gets attention because it's not necessary. It'd be like Michael Phelps sharing that he won a silver medal one day. It's like, all right, you got like 28 golds too. You don't need to talk about the silver and the bronze medals. But I think I agree with Mike Schmidt. Wow, that really, I almost threw up a little bit.
Are you okay?
Tough. We only have so many fingers, like these rings. They're if you win the World Series, you won like 3 rounds.
I know.
Because they're an NLDS ring too. How far back?
Is there a wild card ring?
A wild card spot number 2 ring.
This once again, they expand the playoffs, and then they expand the ring recipients. What's next?
Do the A's get to hang a 2015 AL West division winner banner and say "Flags Fly Forever"? Like, come on, let's be serious. Can we be fucking for real? Rings are for the winners. I don't know what to tell you. They lost.
Yeah, they get the hats. You get a hat that says,
like a T-shirt.
National League champion. Like, you're fine.
You probably also get a trophy, if we're being honest. Like the Phillies probably have like a smaller NL trophy. It's not the commissioner's trophy. It's not that hunk of metal that Rob loves so much, but it is a trophy somewhere. So the ring ceremony was just a lot for me personally. And it's also, for what it's worth, it's the type of thing that if the Phillies had won and the Astros were giving out AL championship rings, Phillies fans would be going ballistic.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, that's enough on that. Next question.
Hey guys, who are some players that you think pour the milk before the cereal?
This is recent Tipping Pitches guest, longtime Tipping Pitches caller, Becca Ansbro, on the mic. Thank you, Becca.
Yeah. I love that she no need to introduce herself anymore. She's like, you know the number. You got caller ID.
It's like, it's as recognizable as like a Picasso, like you just, you know it when you hear it. Who are some players who pour the milk before the cereal? Honestly, we've already been talking about one of them in this episode, and I think that's Bryce Harper. I don't know why, but There is something that feels a little bit like, which dimension did you grow up in to that guy? Like, he grew up in Vegas, which is not like a real place. He's like a huge Las Vegas Knights fan. He's like they're like number one supporter, but also he exists in this like weird superstardom dimension that I don't really know what exists. I think that you know what I'm saying. And his good friend JT Realmuto are definitely, they're pouring the milk in before the cereal.
I love that thought. It's a really good point. There were a couple players who popped into my head when I heard this question. And I want to note.
Don't tell me that you're going to come out as pro milk before cereal right here.
Look, I've never done it myself.
But I don't judge the lifestyle.
So I can't speak to I can't speak to the merits of it. However, there might be something to be said for, instead of just pouring the cereal and then dousing it with milk and letting the bottom get all soggy, right? Doing a little bit of like a, as you go, a little like like a little milk in the bottom, and then like a little splash, kind of, every few bites.
More like chips and salsa. You have the liquid there,
right?
You
exactly.
Put the solid in as needed. As you would like to consume and desire.
Look, I'm just trying to get into the headspace right now. Okay,
Can I ask you a question before you say the names?
Sure.
Because I feel like I said Bryce and I said JT, and I feel like people will understand what I meant by that. But when Becca asks this question, like, how are you flipping through the files in your brain to determine what baseball players? Like, is it like himbos? Like, is it guys who are like off a little bit? Who's another guy? Just naming Phillies. Nick Castellanos might be like milk before the cereal guy, because he's just like, why do you do it this way? That is his whole energy.
That's a good point.
Remember,
actually,
with his whole like, why isn't today opening day?
Yeah, every day is opening day.
He's like,
who
taught you to put the cereal in before the milk, and why do you need to listen to that person?
I really like that take. I mean, the way I was thinking about it is like, who are the guys who are going to take more than 2 seconds to think about this? Who are going to be pouring themselves a bowl of cereal and say, is there a better way? Right. And so Castellanos, for example, I think is a great example of like, why did the man tell us we had to pour the cereal first?
Or also, like, even if he didn't intend to pour the milk before the cereal, he just forgot to put the cereal in first and then started pouring the milk. And it's like, oh, there's no cereal. I'll just put the cereal in now.
It's like, this is serendipitous. This is what the Lord asked me to do.
The Lord? Is he religious? I feel like no.
I don't know.
He doesn't strike me as religious.
I immediately thought of Zach Greinke because he seems like the kind of guy who would say to himself, like, how do I optimize this process? Like,
again, though, like, the milk first is not optimal. You're just saying because like the cereal gets soggy?
Yeah.
You just gotta pick a better cereal. Like, Raisin Bran's not going to get soggy unless you're eating it over the course of like 2 hours.
Oh yeah, it does. I mean, I love Raisin Bran, but that gets soggy so fast.
Honey Bunches of Oats, come on, those are crisp.
Oh yeah. Hey man, I'm not going to defend them. I just, for the sake of a robust debate here, I wanted to kind of, get inside the head a little bit, see how the other side lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I see. To me, I feel like Greinke would just eat the cereal with no milk. He'd be like, why do I need the milk? I'll drink a glass of milk separately while eating the cereal.
You're right. Greinke would probably think far too hard.
Yeah, exactly. He's like inventing a new thing. It's like cereal with milk inside, like a gusher, like
right, like individual packets of cereal with the milk. Yeah,
there's like milk, dehydrated milk at the bottom of the packet, and you pour in water, and then it's all just made at the same time.
Ew. That probably exists.
It probably
right?
does. That's probably what the fucking owners are feeding minor leaguers now with their updated CBA. It's like, here, this is a part of a healthy breakfast. You can have a banana also.
Right. Let it sit in the sun for an hour and it'll it'll decompress.
The way that you cook this meal is you take a magnifying glass to the window of the bus that you're on.
Right.
And you let the sun pass through it and heat it up. No hot plates on the bus. It's a safety hazard.
Chris Sale was the other guy I thought about.
Is it weird that I've just never pictured Chris Sale? I can never picture Chris Sale like eating anything.
Like eating, yeah.
He just seems too mad. It's not. Like cereal, the whole like getting it in and out of the box.
Eating's a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly.
For him.
He's throwing the box against the wall. I feel like I was really dishing it out to the Phillies players, and so I want to prove that I can take it as well. Pete Alonso.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he would like go down fighting being like, this is better.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He would probably have a whole thing about how he wants the milk to come down to room temperature first.
Oh, God.
That's the way he remembers it in Florida. I feel like that's a sufficient answer.
I think so, too.
Okay, Alex, next question comes from Dante in the Slack. Dante wants to know, with regards to the podcast, when did we decide that we were good at it? As Dante himself has made some appearances on podcasts and can never really tell how he feels it went afterwards, which is a feeling that I can relate to. So the short answer to this question is we're still deciding.
Jury's still out.
Something that always happens, let me just pull the listeners behind the curtain a little bit. Something that happens for every single episode of this podcast is heading in, we're like, not sure about this one. I don't know. This one might be tough. And then during the recording, we feel that same way. And then at the end of it, one of the two of us will look at each other and go, I think that one was pretty good.
Yeah. And the other usually shrugs their shoulders and says, we'll see.
In the business, we say, we'll see in the edit, you know? We'll see in the edit. Right. It'll come together in the edit.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer this question in earnest for Dante?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have to necessarily go into the crippling self-doubt or anything like that.
I don't know, man.
Because that's always there. But
making this podcast is way cheaper than therapy, so.
I didn't know that. I should cancel my session this week.
I just got pen all over my hand while I was trying to answer this. I was trying to write down my notes for this question.
So well.
Everything's going good. My pen just like exploded. I don't really know what happened there. Doing our best to prove to Dante that he asked the wrong people.
Right. Bobby's got ink like around his mouth right now. I don't really know how. Yeah, man. It really was just getting on here every week.
Yeah.
Until it kind of felt like a habit, honestly. And I think it really helped bringing on people who I saw and see as being smarter than us and using that as an opportunity to learn from them. Because I think that's how I try to approach the podcast, is trying to soak up everything from the people around me, right?
That's why you become such a great Mets fan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Some say. It's also, you might have to do a little work to get me on your Jazz take, though, I gotta say. One I can't soak up.
We keep alluding to this, and the Jazz take has never been shared on the pod.
Right, I know.
Just gonna keep trickling that out. I think that my earnest answer is, ironically enough, when I left New York and moved to California, and we started doing it remotely, full time, and at that point, it's kind of what you're talking about. It became more of a routine. We would do it every weekend. It's how it got to be the way that it is now, where we would record on Sundays and release the podcast every Monday. Before that, it was a little bit more sporadic. We were still doing it more or less every week, but we got into the routine of, okay, here's everything that happened in the last 6 days. Here's what we know we are going to be interested in talking about, and that is going to translate itself to the best podcast episode. Because if we don't sound excited, if we sound like we're forcing ourselves to talk about something because we think that this is what a baseball podcast should be talking about, then what's the point of even doing all of this? We could just be listening to another baseball podcast talk about this thing. And, you know, those are hard-earned lessons. Like in the first year of doing the show, in the first 18 months of doing the show, I don't think we really knew that we could just opt out of talking about a thing. If it seemed like it was big, we would just talk about it and maybe not even really have anything to say. And I do think that that is the kind of lesson that you have to just like learn via doing it.
Yeah.
Because you don't really know what you're going to respond to and what you're going to enjoy talking about. Like there are some things that are regular mainstays of the show that 5 years ago I would have never thought that I would want to talk to you about week in and week out. And I would have never thought that anybody would want to listen to that, frankly. But we've trained ourselves to be more interested and invested in talking about those things. And listeners have given us a lot of positive feedback on that sort of thing. So honestly, like 2019 is when I started feeling like we were making the show that we wanted to make. And it was basically like almost 2 full years of doing the show before that. And now that's not to say like if you're thinking of starting a podcast that it's going to take 2 years before you know what that podcast is about. But we started this podcast when we were like 21 and 22. And we didn't have a defined idea. We basically were just like, we want to learn how to talk to each other. in recorded format. It wasn't like we have this specific idea for a podcast. We were like, we want to talk about baseball and we want to let it take shape. And so if you were listening to this podcast in 2017 and 2018, you know that it was very different than it is now. And that's, the beauty of doing it with someone that you know so personally, and also the beauty of doing it over an extended period of time and allowing your views on the game to change, but also your views on what you find interesting about talking about to change. So my number one advice would be, don't be discouraged by how not confident you feel at the beginning of doing it, because that is like, unless you're just like, a 1 in a million type of person who has no self-doubt about like the content that they create, then like you're going to experience that for what feels like a really long time.
Yeah. I mean, you know how they say the best way to get better at writing is to write. Right. And the same goes here. I mean, this is why I have in my voice memos actually hour-long recordings that I do throughout the week. Just kind of practicing, going over what I'm going to say. Literally, it's hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes.
Well, that's why they call you the Rivers Cuomo of podcasting.
They do call me that. Yeah.
On Alex's personal Patreon, you can get access to the Google Drives of his voice memos where he practices the pod. And
that and Taking Back Sunday covers.
Well, whoa! You don't have the authority to give that away for free, bro.
That's
you
true.
don't. You don't.
I've already entered into a contract with you,
and that's binding. That was recorded and published to the internet. That's not looking so good, by the way. Mets are not off to a bad start, but they're not off to like a we're going to win 110 game start.
No.
So I think you're pretty in the clear on that front. I'm gonna have to find another way to bet that out into the world.
Yeah, I don't. Give me 4 beers and put me on the Citi Field jumbotron. Apparently, that's all it takes.
Another thing that you also do is that you listen to the podcast and you retake everything that you said, right? That's like your Wednesday activity. You listen, you recreate it, and you try to say, "How could I have gotten better here?" Like you watch tape, basically, of all of your at bats.
Right.
Okay. Next.
This is very helpful advice. I'm sure.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Bobby. It's Jessie. I'm wanting to ask about dynamic duos of baseball past and present, and dynamic duos which fit into the she's everything, he's just Ken Barbie movie marketing. So, like, I'm thinking Vladdy, she's everything. Bo Bichette, he's just Ken. Do you see the vision? Okay, thanks.
This is
such a good question.
Such a funny question. And also, I'm glad that Jesse gave an example, because it's not just that like Bo Bichette is not bad. He's just plain,
Yeah.
He's not the it attraction of the Toronto Blue Jays. And so
Exactly.
I'm not going to choose someone who sucks as the Ken. So that narrows down my window. Like when I first heard this question, I was like, she's everything, Joe Davis. He's just Ken, John Smoltz.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. She's everything, Alex Rodriguez. He's just Ken, Michael K.
I feel like they're both just Ken.
Okay. She's everything, Derek Jeter. He's just Ken, Alex Rodriguez.
Get his ass.
See, now we're getting somewhere. What do you got? What do you got?
It pains me to say that I initially thought of Shohei Ohtani because she is everything.
Yeah.
And Michael Trout.
Michael Trout.
He's just Ken. I love him.
Yeah. She's everything, Bryce Harper. He's just Ken, JT Realmuto.
Yep. She's everything, Dansby Swanson. He's just Ken, Austin Riley.
He's not even on the Braves anymore, but I like it. Dansby Swanson, not on the Braves.
Dansby Swanson.
She's everything, Mal Pugh. He's just Ken, Dansby Swanson.
She's everything, Rafael Devers. He's just Ken, Trevor Story.
Yeah, he had to get the arm detached and replaced this year too. He's just Ken.
That's tough.
She's everything, Francisco Lindor. He's just Ken, Pete Alonso.
That was the second name.
He's
names
just
I wrote
Ken.
Down.
Jeff McNeil. He's just Ken. Brandon Nimmo.
Brandon Nimmo.
He's just Ken. Luis Guillorme. He's just Ken. No, Mark Hanna's not just Ken. Mark Hanna could be She's Everything.
Yeah.
She's Everything. Starling Marte.
That really is a team of mostly Kens, though.
It's all Kens. It's all Kens with a couple Barbies.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great question.
Yeah. We could keep going.
She's Everything. Theo
Marcus
Epstein.
Simeon.
He's just Ken. Rob Manfred.
Yeah, is Theo your everything?
I mean, with the whole rule changes, they're sending him out. He's like the face of the rule changes, you know? So he's on the marketing. He's on the posters.
He's carrying that emotional labor.
Dude, he is. I think that they've cloned him. He's been on every podcast. I'm insulted that they haven't offered him to us at this point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They've offered him to every other podcast around us. Like, I'm waiting for the Theo Epstein effectively wild hit at this point.
Yeah. You're actually right about that.
I know. Like, just fucking talk to someone who's actually going to ask you questions that I want to know the answer to for once.
I know. But you don't think our demographic is not your market, Rob? We got some minds you might be interested in changing here.
I would argue that our demographic is sort of like would be the coup de grace. It'd be like the cherry on top. Like if he can send Theo to us and win over hearts and minds, he's won, you know?
Yeah.
It's like sending Darth Vader to the rebellion headquarters and he's like, actually, the Empire is good.
That is what it's like.
Thank you. I'm here all week.
She's Everything. Giancarlo Stanton.
Do it to him.
He's just Ken. Aaron Judge. Sorry, what have you done for me lately, Aaron?
Has he hit another home run since opening day? Aaron Judge washed alert? He has hit 4 home runs and he's hitting 364 this year. So,
all right, not washed alert.
Aaron Judge, not washed alert? We're definitely going to hear from Mike Schubert about that one, about that little slip up right there. Mm-hmm. You know who has more home runs than that? Pete Alonso.
Jazz Chisholm?
No.
No,
He's not. No. Although, I'll give you this one. She's Everything, Jazz Chisholm. He is just Ken, all of the Miami Marlins.
That's actually true.
Every single
Especially with Pablo not there anymore.
Yeah. Well, Sandy's everything.
He is everything. That's true.
Jesse, thank you so much. What a great question. Probably could have got a whole pod.
I'm going to be thinking about this all day. Yeah. This was the 2-hour pod right there.
Well,
Bobby had to cut about an hour and a half of content.
Yeah. And Alex, you can go to Alex's Patreon and sign up for his voice memos. The extended cut, if you want to hear the whole thing. Next question. This comes from Alex in the Slack, which is not you. That's not you. You are Alex in the Slack, but you are not this Alex in the Slack. Right. This is another one of our FAQs. Best teams to watch for newly converted baseball fans. I feel like we get asked this around the beginning of every baseball season, and it changes, but for the most part, there is a handful of teams that are largely very fun to watch. Has that list materialized for you yet this season?
Heard of the Oakland Athletics?
Yeah.
Chance to get in on the ground floor?
Yeah. Dude.
Hey, man. No emotional baggage. You get to start clean.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
Is this the worst baseball team you've ever seen in your life?
It's actually really possible. They're really, really, really bad.
They're going to lose like 115 games.
Yep.
I know that the Rays haven't lost yet, but that didn't look like they were in the same league. Like that looked like the gap in quality between some of the World Baseball Classic teams.
Yes, it did.
It was not pretty. I have watched more A's baseball than I really thought I would have at this point because I'm fascinated at
morbidly curious
at the car crash that is the Oakland A's in 2023.
It's not a fun car crash. I'll tell you that much. It's not one you can watch with awe. It's just
happening.
And there's nothing you can do.
All right, what's your real answer?
Twins. Twins are fun this year.
Yeah.
I feel like in past years we've said the Orioles because they are sort of on the come up. They've got the young, if you want to get in actually on a ground floor with a team, here's a team who in theory is building for the future, right? And I just, as every day goes by, I just feel less and less good about ever encouraging someone to root for John Angelos.
Yeah. It must have been you that said that in years past because I have never really enjoyed I don't enjoy watching teams who are at like the turnaround stage of their rebuild because there's usually
Right.
such obvious glaring holes, and it makes me furious that they weren't filled with better players that could have made this team actually fun to watch instead of just like a fun thing for like baseball content creators to tweet on like April 1st, be like, eyes emoji, Baltimore's coming this year. And it's like, no, they're not. They're not coming. And they're not going to make the playoffs. And like, you know why they're not coming? Because they have no pitchers.
Yep.
Like they called up Grayson Rodriguez because it became impossible for them to manipulate his service time anymore because they actually needed somebody to fill the fifth rotation spot. It's not like they were like slamming the door shut on him particularly. So I don't know. I mean, Adley is great to watch, of course. If you could put a cam on him the whole time, then great. Yeah. And I did I tune into Grayson Rodriguez's first start? Yes, I did. But would I rather watch the Blue Jays versus anyone? Yes, I would.
So is that your team? Is that your pick?
Blue Jays. The obvious ones I feel like are Blue Jays and Padres.
Right.
The Angels because of Ohtani and Trout. I'll take this moment to plug really quickly the Effectively Wild. This is great podcasting. Is when you tell someone who's listening to your podcast to go listen to another podcast halfway through your podcast. They say that that's how you become the biggest podcast in the world. Is you do that a lot. Effectively Wild did a team fun draft. They've done it the last few years where they draft the teams that are the most fun all the way down to the very least fun, which was arguably more fun to listen to them talk about which teams they don't want to watch than the ones that they do.
Right.
But that is a really great episode if you're looking for like a more fleshed out, robust version of this conversation. But yeah, Padres, Blue Jays, Angels. I think the Phillies are really fun to watch. I said this last year too, because like a great lineup, terrible defense, shaky bullpen pitching makes for entertaining back and forth in baseball games. And if you're not invested in whether or not the Phillies win, although you could argue that I'm too invested in whether or not the Phillies win, I'm just invested in the fact that they lose. But it makes for a fun back and forth. And then you know what? I think the Rays are kind of fun to watch this year.
What?
Because okay, Wander is he's the one. He might be the prince who was promised. And he was hurt for a lot of last year, which sort of cut short his arrival party that should have been happening with he came up and he was great 2 years ago and he signed the extension. And then last year was supposed to be kind of his coming out party and it just didn't happen. But in terms of like technical execution of the game of baseball, if you're nerdy in that way and you can put aside all the other stuff that we've banned from talking about the Tampa Bay Rays, like that is a fun exhibition of the sport of baseball, though maybe not exactly for a new fan. I think the Padres are still far and away for a new fan of baseball.
Yeah, who wants to have fun this year? Like the Padres are the one.
Okay, next question. This is a 2-part question. Comes from Kate in the Slack. Who will play the All-Star Game weekend concert in Seattle? And who would be the funniest choice to play that concert? So presumably this is like a thing that they do every year where they like put on a concert for All-Star Weekend, I guess.
Sure, I'll take your word for it.
It tracks. I trust Kate with this question. And if not, it doesn't really matter. Like the question is, who do you want to see play a concert in Seattle to celebrate Major League Baseball's All-Star Weekend?
I mean, I feel like they're going to pick an artist with ties to Seattle, I would assume, right? A guy like Macklemore feels like exactly what Major League Baseball would be looking for in terms of like All-Star Game entertainment, you know, like palatable to the middle of the country, but also like young and hip.
You're
Very little
saying
meaning
that
in the
Macklemore is
words.
young and hip.
I not in my eyes, but to someone like Rob Manfred, absolutely.
I feel like their platonic ideal is the Foo Fighters.
Okay.
They're formed in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Ties to Seattle grunge scene with Dave Grohl, obviously. Stadium rock, that kind of unoffensive style of music that can be marketed very easly.
Right. It hypes you up, you know.
And also, like,
it's very.
I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. I don't mind Foo Fighters. They're cool.
No. Oh, no, not at all.
They're doing good stuff. I'm not firing. I'm not streaming, but it's okay. I didn't know Macklemore was. I didn't know he was from Seattle.
Yeah, he's like a big Mariners fan. He did like a whole like Mariners song and music video. Like That's part of the reason why I think my mind went to him is because like
Macklemore is a wild public
He's-
figure. You look like you want to say so much more.
I don't even know, man.
Oh, wow. A lot of stolen LGBTQ plus valor from that guy over the years.
A lot of things over the years.
Did you know the Postal Service are from Seattle, Washington?
I probably could have guessed that.
We will be firing up such great heights at All-Star Weekend this year.
Uh-huh.
Ben Gibbard, who is the singer for the Postal Service and a few other bands as well, is a huge baseball fan. So that feels like a good option. Although, I don't know, is the Postal Service still polling well enough to be able to play MLB All-Star Weekend?
Right. I mean, do you need
like more than
like you
three
need
songs?
A bit, right? Exactly. That's not just a one-hit wonder, right? Like,
kind of the funniest option is Pearl Jam to me personally,
uh-huh.
because that would be so many dudes would just be like Pearl Jam, yeah. You know,
I know. I was like, oh wow, Chris Cornell's from Seattle, little Soundgarden.
Let's get a little Fleet Foxes in there, dog.
Okay, are we both just on the Wikipedia for list of musicians from Seattle?
Yeah. Oh, I just got to Macklemore. How about that? Band of Horses. Let's get emo at T-Mobile Park. I think that like the most likely option, like regardless of what city it is. So I'm like not picking the pandering Seattle option, but the most likely option, platonic ideal for Major League Baseball every single year is Bad Bunny. Like if Bad Bunny will do it, he's got it.
Yeah.
Both because he's like the most popular artist in the world, and he's like very popular among young people, but also because he's like just unbelievably dominant in Spanish speaking countries, and many of those countries baseball is their number one sport. So
yeah, I mean that would be the obvious right choice, which is why it probably won't be him.
He's probably busy at that time playing like a stadium tour in front of 3 million people, or like an impromptu street show. Like everything he does is cool. He's
Kenny G is from Seattle.
Wow. Bust out the sax, dude.
I mean, he's got baseball ties.
That would be such a vibe.
That would be a vibe.
He should score the game. Like no organ, just Kenny G with the sax during the game.
That's a really good idea.
Thank you. I'm here all week.
We know that Rob listens. So, Rob, here you go. This one's
I'm a producer. I'm an ideas guy.
You are.
Know? I can't play the saxophone, but I know when I should hear it. Kate also asked another question unrelated to music or the MLB All-Star Weekend. Kate said, could Stevie hack it as a bat dog?
No.
What do you think?
No. I love her.
It's really important to know our own strengths and weaknesses.
Uh-huh.
It's really important to be able to clearly communicate the strengths and weaknesses of our loved ones. Stevie doesn't listen well enough to be a bat dog, doesn't do well in crowds, doesn't like loud noises, gets stressed in situations that she's not familiar with. She is arguably the worst option on planet Earth to be a bat dog. She would hear the sound of the ball off the bat, and she would be in the clubhouse, cowering in fear.
Mm-hmm.
She's a little anxiety girly.
Yeah, she is.
And look, we love her for it. But no, she could not hack it as a bat dog. She's more of a small settings kind of gal.
Yeah, she is. She's the emotional support dog in the clubhouse.
She's just like me for real.
Yeah.
Actually, in the clubhouse, she wouldn't even be good either. That's still too many people for her. But
that's a lot.
The clubhouse being...
It can't be like more than 5.
You and I recording. That's the clubhouse that she thrives in.
Right.
Okay, Alex. Our final 2 questions come from Twitter. They are both Muppets related. So strap in. First question comes from Philly Pitchers Union, local number 27. This is our good friend Joe from Twitter. Joe says, my pet fantasy is to win the lottery and buy the rights to the Muppets. It's great to have goals. I'd make more Muppets movies based on classic literature like they did with The Christmas Carol and Treasure Island. If you were in this situation, what is the first book you're adapting into a feature film? This is an inspired question.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to...
Lord of the Flies.
No hesitation. I just want to know that there wasn't...
I don't want to see who gets to the top of the rock.
There wasn't an edit in there. Sometimes we gather sometimes most of the time we gather our thoughts, and there's some silence that I cut out, but Alex just cut straight to the chase right there. No cut.
Yeah.
I want
to know who Piggy's gonna be.
I was gonna say
who's gonna get the conch.
I was gonna say King Lear.
Ooh,
which is basically like Succession,
right?
The original Succession. Shakespeare did it first. Although I will say, and this takes us to our next question, which comes from Abigail at Bring the Noise on Twitter. Which Muppet has the biggest Mets fan energy? And I'll say I'm not super familiar with the Muppets. Like I know who they all are, but I don't know them all well enough to
like their personalities
to speak confidently about that. I wasn't a huge Muppets person growing up, which is not an indictment of the Muppets by any means. I know that they're
that's an indictment of you.
Yes, exactly. I know that this is just like a total gap in my cultural consumption.
Right. My mind went to Oscar the Grouch.
Okay. Why is that? If it's not obvious.
He complains all the time. Because he's just always mad. Again, wears his heart, his emotions on his sleeve, I think tends to wallow in self-pity a lot. And I will even say, after doing a bit of research for this question, according to Muppet Wiki, in episode 0020, Oscar does clean his trash can and dumps things out, including a Mets banner, which he tells his friend Gordon that he doesn't want to lose. So there's actually a little bit of textual evidence
canon
behind this one.
That's a great answer. I don't think I can beat that. I think aesthetically speaking, Animal kind of fits the bill.
Uh-huh.
But also Animal kind of looks like Gritty, so if maybe we can say Animal's a Phillies fan.
Right, yeah.
But I like your answer. Oscar the Grouch. Is that the energy that I put out into the world? You can be honest with me.
No, it's I think it's a little more Mr. Snuffleupagus.
Because just sad?
Right.
I'm riding hard for the Eeyore contingent of Mets fans.
That's it. Yeah.
Like just moping around, being like, it's never going to be our time. What's the point of even playing today?
Yeah.
I can be moved.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, I can be moved to be interested from time to time, but I default to sad. That way I protect myself.
Generally speaking, what's the point,
exactly.
Right?
Okay, Alex, that does it this week. Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to everybody for calling in. As a reminder, if you want to call in for future mailbag episodes, or even if it's not a full episode, just to get your question in at the end of occasional episodes, which we do sometimes, the voicemail number is 785-422-5881. You can sign up for the Tipping Pitches Slack, where many of these questions came from, at patreon.com/tippingpitches. Any of those tiers will get you access to the Slack, and the higher 2 tiers will get you access to more things, including a newsletter, which Alex is definitely going to get done at some point. I just know it. I know. I see the look in his eyes. He's a gamer. He's been reviewing his tape recently, and he's just trying to identify his weaknesses. He's made some mechanical changes, and so he's going to iron out these kinks. Other than that, is there anything else that you would like people to know this week? Maybe the secret sauce to getting on the giant Jumbotron at Mets games?
I don't know. Apparently it's to dislike Billy Joel, because they'll find you if that's the case.
I think that you secretly like Piano Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, why else would you try so hard to have your face associated with it in front of 40,000 people?
Right.
Something
I think it's
dark down. You're just putting up a facade. Like you just don't think it's cool to like Billy Joel.
I think it's my fealty to the Mets, and Mets fandom and wanting to,
That's powerful. It's like feudal lords.
That's right. I submit myself for the New York Mets.
What our relationship to New York Mets and Major League Baseball is the exact opposite of feudalism. Like, we don't get anything in exchange. We just give them money.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how feudalism worked. Like, the feudal lord was supposed to be there to protect us. We're like venture capital to the Mets, just providing them seed funding with
single-handedly
no need.
funding them.
for any real business plan.
Yeah, if the cost of my beers was any indication this weekend, that's about right.
Yeah.
That's why Steve didn't need their advertising on the Jumbotron, because he's got you and me.
Yeah, I might be done. I might be done with Citi Field.
Oh, yeah. Here he is. He's back, baby. Oscar has checked in.
Speaking as an accountant, I might be done with Citi Field. Everybody, please go listen to Piano Man in honor of Alex. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week.
But it's sad and it's sweet, and I knew it complete when I wore a younger man's clothes.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!